Minnesota Vikings superstar wide receiver Justin Jefferson had some intriguing comments after the Vikings' victory over the Seattle Seahawks on Sunday afternoon. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. That subscribe button right there. And Merry Christmas to you a day late. Sorry that I have not been recording a podcast for the last few days. Tuesday, I was miserably sick with either the stomach flu or the food poisoning because I was leaned and hunched over the toilet roughly 10 times in that day. And then yesterday was Christmas, and now today is Thursday morning, and I'm closer to 100% than I was on Tuesday and Wednesday, but I'm still only like 8 out of 10. Head feels great, neck feels better, throat still feels a little off. So that's the update on me. But Justin Jefferson was very confident. He raves about the Minnesota Vikings Super Bowl chances following the Vikings win over the Seahawks. And Kevin Seifert of ESPN wrote an article about it. It says right here, "We're coming together," said wide receiver Justin Jefferson, whose second touchdown reception Sunday accounted for the final margin in a 27-24 victory over the Seattle Seahawks. "Every single game, we're finding different ways to overcome adversity. These close games are what make championship teams." Jefferson continues, "Oh, for sure," he said. "Not just what we're doing out there on the field, but the way we're carrying ourselves, the way we treat each other. In 2019, when I was a champion at LSU, it was the same type of vibe. The team is just together, fighting for one another every single game. It definitely feels the same." So that's what Justin Jefferson had to say about the Minnesota Vikings Super Bowl window this season, which is way ahead of schedule before anybody else thought that the Minnesota Vikings could even contend for a Super Bowl. And what's so awesome about the Minnesota Vikings run this season is that they have made it past the tiers that I was talking about earlier. You know, you start the season 2-0, 3-0, big deal. You got to make it past the fluky tier. Like the Saints, they started out super hot. They crushed the Cowboys. They crushed some other teams, put up like 40-something points per game. And then they fell off the face of the cliff. That's the fluky stage. And then they kind of go on to the next stage. You're winning some games. You're winning a lot of games. And can't remember what I called that stage. But the Pittsburgh Steelers were in that stage, right? They were winning all these games. They were super good. And now they're 10-6. So they did not make it past that middle end of the season stage. And the Minnesota Vikings have now made it past all of the regular season stages. They made it past the 2-0 fluky stage. They made it past the midseason, your 9-2 stage. And now they're 13-2. And now they have 2 games left versus the Lions and the Green Bay Packers. So there's no doubt in my mind that the Minnesota Vikings are Super Bowl contenders right now, and they are a better football team than they were if we're comparing this team to the 2017 Case Keenum team. And maybe the 2017's teams had a better defense, but offensively, 2024 is way better. Darnold is heads and shoulders above Case Keenum. Justin Jefferson's better than Stephon Diggs. Jordan Addison's probably better than Adam Thielen. TJ Hawkinson's better than whoever was the tight end in 2017. And Aaron Jones is a very competent running back. I can't even remember who was a running back in 2017. So, anyways, the fact that the Minnesota Vikings are coming together, Justin Jefferson sees it. He felt it when they won a championship at LSU back in 2019. It feels like a special season, and it's felt like a special season for a long time. I'm on record earlier in the season saying that, this season feels more like 2009 than it did 2017 because of the way Sam Darnold was throwing the football. Sam Darnold had Brett Favre vibes, and 2009, there was really nothing like it. Every game, it felt like Brett Favre was going to pull off a miracle pass where the Vikings are going to blow out some team. You think about Favre to Greg Lewis. Well, that's kind of Darnold to Jefferson this season. And it's been an amazing run of everything coming together. And I mean everything, health-wise. Besides Hockenson missing the first few games because of last year's injury, Jordan Addison missed a game or two earlier in the season. Christian Darrisaw, ruptured his ACL or whatever, but he traded for Cam Robinson. Besides that, Darnold's been healthy. He's had some, nicks and bruises here, but he's been able to make it through any long-term sustainable injuries that have been avoided. Aaron Jones, a guy who's typically been injured in the past, has been healthy basically the entire season. Jefferson's been healthy. Addison's been healthy besides the first few games. Hawkinson's been healthy since he's come back. The Minnesota Vikings defense has been healthy for the most part, besides a Smith missing a game, besides a Stephon Gilmore missing a game or two, besides a Blake Cashman. There have been no long-term injuries on the Minnesota Vikings this season besides a Christian Darrisaw. He's a valuable piece. He's the best offensive lineman on our team, but they were able to replace him pretty quickly with a trade for Cam Robinson. Now, Robinson's no Christian Darrisaw, but wow, he has been good. He's been better than what could have been if you shifted Dalton Ryan to the left side, took Blake Brandel, shifted him over there, and you put Ed Ingram, you kept him in at that spot. Trading for Cam Robinson let Dalton Reisner fill the spot for Ed Ingram, who's been much better, and kept Blake Brandel at his spot, who's been very solid this season. And the Minnesota Vikings offense has not missed a beat, even with superstar left tackle Christian Darrisaw not on the roster. So the fact that the Vikings are Super Bowl contenders is awesome. And it's amazing because really nobody expected it before the season started. And Jefferson has said what it is. He said it feels special. It feels like one of those teams where everybody's coming together. And it's one of those things also where winning cures everything. And the Minnesota Vikings are 13-2. So, of course, nobody's going to say anything negative right now. You're 13-2. You're on an 8-game winning streak. The Minnesota Vikings are rolling. If they win out, they're the number one seed in the NFC. 2 tough divisional games left versus the Packers and Lions. But right now, things are so good that no one's going to say anything bad, and they shouldn't. Kevin O'Connell's speeches are being glorified all over the NFL and in Minnesota because after every single game for the last 8 games, those speeches have been posted to social media accounts, and everyone's talking about it. Sam Darnold's and everyone's talking about the contract that he's going to receive either from the Minnesota Vikings or another football team this offseason. These are all exciting things that people are talking about because the Minnesota Vikings are winning football games. And I can't disagree with anything Jefferson is saying because the Minnesota Vikings have made it past all 3 stages of flukiness. Beginning, midseason, and end stage, Minnesota Vikings are 13-2. The worst record they can have is 13-4. They're a Super Bowl contender. Even if they have to go on the road in the playoffs and face the Falcons or face the Buccaneers or face the Seahawks, I think they can get past that game. I think they can win that football game, especially with the way the Minnesota Vikings offense and defense is playing this season, and especially because of the health that they've had so far this year. So coming up this Sunday, the Minnesota Vikings have a matchup with the Packers at US Bank Stadium. The Vikings had a big lead against them earlier in the year, up 20-0, something like that. And now the Packers are rolling. They're hot. They're feeling good about themselves. They just clobbered the Saints on Monday Night Football, which is a good thing for the Vikings because it means that the Saints or the Packers are coming off of a short week. The blowout isn't good. You'd rather have that be a competitive game so that they're not as rested for this game. But Monday Night Football, short week. And the Packers, they've been playing well. They beat the Saints 34-0. They beat Seattle 30-13, but Geno Smith was out. They lost to the Lions by a field goal. They clobbered Miami 30-17. They clobbered San Fran 38-10. And they beat Chicago 20-19. in these last two games, this matchup versus the Green Bay Packers is going to be the toughest. Because for some reason, I don't know what it is. I don't follow the Packers that closely. But this season and last season, the Packers have a tendency to peak at the right time of year. Last year, the Packers were like, 2-6? Jordan Love was looking like a bust. And then at the end of the year, he went on for like 24 touchdowns and few picks and were a few bad throws from being in the NFC Championship game. And this season, they started off slow again and started off 2-2. And then here they are, 4 wins in a row, lost 3 wins in a row, lost 2 wins in a row. So this is one of the Packers' strengths, is to peak at the right time at the end of the year. And that's exactly what they're doing. So that's why this is going to be a tough game for the Minnesota Vikings on Sunday. And, the worst part about this game on Sunday is that it got flexed to a 325. And I'll be intrigued to hear what Tom Brady has to say about the game. We haven't had him yet. But the reviews on him have not been great so far. Everyone has been mentioning that Greg Olsen is way better than Tom Brady. And so far, based on what I've heard from Greg Olsen this season and last season, Greg Olsen's been, top cream of the crop, top notch kind of announcer. I really enjoyed listening to his takes, and he brings interesting and expert analysis to the table when he does football games on Fox. But it'll be interesting to see what Tom Brady brings to the table, because I think expectations were so high for Tom. Becomes Fox's number one guy. His first season doing it, takes Greg Olsen and puts him as number 2. But the worst part about this game is that it's a 325 start. There's nothing better than coming home after church and eating lunch, praying before lunch, and then watching a little football at 12 with their kids napping, and recording a podcast at 3:30 or 4 o'clock or whatever it is, instead of 7:30. And you know what? 325 games just aren't the best. You have to wait for that whole entire window in the morning. Your kids are awake. And last week I had to watch basically the entire game versus the Seahawks on my phone, because I want to be a present dad. I want to be playing with my kids. And, 325 game, you watch that game and also it's bedtime, and it's like, oh, I spent no time with my kids today. And you know what? 325 games suck. So that's the worst part about this game. But it will be a huge matchup, because it got flexed to a national football game of the week. Everyone's telling us it's going to be a big matchup. And you know what? The Packers are going to be hungry, because they win out, Vikings lose out, Packers become the 5 seed, get a better matchup. And this is a big game for both teams. And Packers are peaking, Vikings are playing well. It's reasonable and understandable why this game became the game of the week on Sunday. But Jefferson calls the Minnesota Vikings Super Bowl contenders. He raves about their chances. And right now, who can disagree with him? It looks special. It feels special. And you can see it on the faces of the players. It's not that hard to read body language of professional athletes. Look at the Timberwolves, for example. The Timberwolves, they don't like playing with each other. You can tell that Anthony Edwards doesn't like playing with Julius Randle. He struggles to play with Rudy Gobert, and Rudy Gobert hates playing with Julius Randle as well. You can see it all over their faces. They have no effort offensively. Their defensive effort is up and down at times. And you know what? The Minnesota Timberwolves, they're 15-14 right now. Snuck by the Mavericks last night after having a 30-point lead, won by like a few points, but a Kyrie Irving 3-pointer away from taking the lead with like a minute or two left. And you can just see it all over the Timberwolves' faces. The effort isn't there. The movement's not there. You can tell that the chemistry isn't there. But from the Minnesota Vikings standpoint, you can tell it's all there. They like playing with each other. They're winning football games, and they're finding ways to win, which is awesome, and it's been incredible. The Minnesota Vikings, 13-2. Just think about it. They could be 15-2 at the point the season's over. And it could also be 13-4. But they also could be 15-2. And if they are 13-4, well, their over-under was 6.5. The Minnesota Vikings have over doubled expectations from everybody at the beginning of the season. So it's been a historical run and a special season for the Minnesota Vikings.